Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Cramer is back.
Yeah, it's been quite a sprint back and forth. But you all been great. You really have. And we've been very cohesive, I've noticed, and that's also good. And so you've covered a number of issues, but I want to start, Ms. Lewis said a couple of things that interest me, and I missed a little bit, and she brought me kind of up to speed with regard to agency coordination. And so I want to ask all of you, I'm going to start with you, Dr. Lemon. As I'm sitting here listening, and people may not remember that I was the Economic Development Director in North Dakota before there was a Department of Commerce, and helped the then governor candidate John Hoeven create a Department of Commerce and the legislature. For the very reason that there, even in a state as small as North Dakota, there's a lot of agencies that do similar things, and there's not always a great coordination effort, right? So that's the Department of Commerce. Makes some sense. Let's bring it all together. Have one brand, one marketing scheme. Try to coordinate all of the financial tools. So I'm sitting here and I was thinking, well, let's see. Now you've got the EDA. Today's all about the EDA, and you hear some of the good things and some of the challenges and some of the tweaks. A lot about flexibility, bottom up. I agree with all of that, right? But I would be interested if anybody had any ideas about whether we could reconcile some of the multitude of programs. So EDA has one set of rules, right? And you got to do all this paperwork. And then, but they're not the same as maybe a CDBG grant, not the same as which is not the same as USDA Rural Development Grant, which is not the same as an SBA loan program. And not that they can all be identical, but does anybody have any thoughts about how we can maybe reconcile some of that even across, before we even get to the interagency coordination that Ms. Liu talked about? Could we reconcile some of the programs so it wasn't so burdensome in the first place? Dr. Lemon.
Thank you, Senator Cramer. And publicly, I'd like to thank you for laying the foundation for a lot of, in reality, I'm not just saying that because you're U.S. Senator from North Dakota, but a lot of the reason why we're seeing a lot of the energy successes and programs today that have been successful for our state are due to your vision as well as some of your successors before I showed up. So I got really lucky because my job's really easy as a result. But I would say that many federal programs, whether it be like you mentioned HUD or DOT or EDA, et cetera, tend to be fairly burdensome. I'd imagine from your perspective, at a local rural economic development organization, they may not, especially in smaller or lower populated counties, they may not have the requisite staffing to put together these burdensome approaches. My suggestion would be to reduce duplicity in terms of programmatic delivery, but also if there's a way we can streamline these things. In some applications you can have requirements as high as several hundred pages, and in local communities, and I know EDA tends to be among the better, but in local communities that's very burdensome. So it's not just the financial burden of the match requirement, but it's also the audit burdens, the paperwork burdens, the collection of data burdens, et cetera, that they may not have access to. My suggestion to fix that would be for the EDA, maybe to form and they may have this, but I'm unaware of it, like a rural development task force, so that communities that don't have the resources and require the streamlining can help educate federal agencies on areas that we can help them streamline the process, but also help them with their grading criteria, because a lot of times we find that return on investment may not be as may not be as high on the list as other priorities, but these returns on investment to communities, if streamlined well, could serve the federal government and rural states across the country. So I would recommend having state, local, regional mix to help inform and recommend programmatic delivery for the EDA.
Great. And I guess I would just extend that same question to you, Mr. Whitehair and Mr. Bowman, as well as Ms. Liu in the remaining minute or so that we have.
Sure. Thanks. Good question. Obviously, as a as a practitioner of doing these applications on a daily basis for a number of years, obviously, from my position, would it be easy to have the same application for every program that is available? Absolutely. Our job, our responsibility as an EDD is to make sure we make it as easy as possible for our communities and don't get overwhelmed and looking at some of the possibilities that may be available for their priorities in their communities. I think I guess where it gets, and again, from my perspective, a lot of the communities really don't understand what the involvement requires as far as putting together a project or some of the regulations that come with some of these agencies that you identified, for example, CDBG. There are some aspects of those programs that I think could be streamlined, absolutely. Till this day, I've been 25 years. I don't understand why it's in there. Some of these requirements and regulations that come with these programs does not make sense. Has no bearing on the project specific scope of that project. But I think, definitely it would be nice to have it streamlined a little bit because it does deter communities from applying to some of these programs. However, on the other side of that, my job is to make it easy as possible for these communities in order to do it and don't get overwhelmed. So,
Thank you. Anybody else in the remaining seconds I don't have? Mr. Bowman.
We usually
yeah.
allot 7 minutes, but our colleague's time has expired. Is there anybody else that wanted to say something? Did I hear, Ms. Lou, was that you?
Yes, I just wanted to quickly say that I reinforce the desire that we probably don't need a lot of new programs and instead need to focus on effective implementation. So just two ideas. One is whether or not interagency federal coordination can actually happen at the regional offices to provide technical assistance to local leaders, urban and rural, on how to navigate co-investment opportunities in the federal government. I think what we're hearing from our leaders here as the practitioners have a really hard time understanding the maze of dollars. If the regional offices provided that interagency coordination and technical assistance, I think that would be great. And I think it'd be really interesting for the headquarter offices to think about joint NOFAs to facilitate sort of coordinated co-investments around these big plans that local leaders have.